In this demo, I want to talk about pull-out quotes for your magazine and also text wrap for images as well as those pull-out quotes. So I pulled up a couple of student files, their final files that I want to use as some examples, and I want to point out some things that I think are working really well and some things that could be better. So on this spread, let me zoom in just a little bit here. The pull-out quote is actually set at the top of this box, which is fine. This text box here is still a 3-column, so you can see it's still one box, and that is the correct way to do it. So this pull-out quote is kind of interrupting, if you will, the text. It's pushing it down. And the reason it's doing that is because the text wrap is set here to jump object. So under your windows, you have a text wrap window, and there are some quick things up here you can use, or you could just open this. I like to keep it in my panel off to the side so that I have easy access. So with text wrap, if you start with this one on the left, it's no text wrap. So you can see the text just goes right over that. And then wrap around the bounding box. It'll work the same in this instance because the bounding box is just what this quote is actually sitting in. And notice that the text is touching the top, so it's keeping with this full kind of line across. So if I pull a guide down, you can see that it creates a nice structured grid. So that is the right way to do it. I wouldn't want to move this text down at all because you want to keep that grid going. So if I click on this again and I go to this next one, this just means that it's wrapping around the object or the shape. So in this case, the text box is the shape. That would work differently if it was actually a shape. So even if you draw some kind of a shape and you put this wrap around the shape, you can see what happens. It wraps around that actual shape versus the box, that bounding box. So that's really the difference between these two. And one of the things that I want you to notice is how close this text gets on either side. And that's what this option's for down here. This is saying how far do you want that text to come in? How close do you want it to get? You do have to watch out for things like this because that F for the Fahrenheit can't get any closer. So you definitely would want to adjust it so that it wasn't separated like that. So this allows you to adjust and don't feel like you're tied to this. Like if this is too much and this is too little, you can come in and change this to really whatever it is that you want. Okay, and then this this is just jump to the next column, so probably wouldn't want to do that here. So in this case, that is the correct that's the correct one. One of the things on this one is these aren't quote marks, so I would make sure that you actually use quotation marks, and I would probably put a little more space in here before the name. So you should, if it's not the author speaking, you need to put in who said this quote. That's pretty important. We need to know who said it. So let's say it was an interview. I would still put it in there, who it is that said that. Let me shut down my email because it keeps dinging. Okay. So there is, I don't use this very often, but let's go try this. I noticed this the other day where it was insert special characters, and then there was an option to put in some quote marks. So double right quotes. That's another way that you can do it. So just under type, insert special character quotation marks. So you do want to make sure that you have quotation marks, and your period should go inside the quotation mark unless it's a quote itself. Like if they're quoting something, if it's a quote within the quote, then the period goes outside. And you can always ask if you have a question. So this is one example, and I'm going to zoom out real quick because one thing I did want to note is on your magazine project, this is what your cover should look like. This is the student's redesign, and this is an actual one of a copy of the cover, and the cover should be next to the your design because you're using this as kind of a template. You're recreating the major components of it and kind of following that style. You want to get the barcode wherever it is, but your cover is going to feature your article. So obviously it's not going to have this picture, and the information is going to be different because whatever your title is what's going to be featured. But you do want to download the logo, um, and you do want to kind of mimic and lay out basically what they have. So in your file, the original should be there. So here's another example. This is an original magazine that was printed, and this is the student's design. So this one doesn't have it. So this student lost points for not having a Time magazine here. Okay, so let's go down to where the quote mark is and the quote pullout is in here. And talking about pullouts don't need to be in the exact location. So I've seen students try to put the quote mark where it is in the story, and that's not important. It actually should not be in it, close to where it is. So like if I'm reading this quote and then I come down here and it's right here, that's kind of weird. I usually try and put it somewhere else, and I think of balance. So this has 1, 2, 3, so it's kind of creating some balance here. It's also pulling some purple down in here. So this feels pretty good because this is a larger picture, and then there's two smaller things on this page that kind of balance that out. So that feels good, and don't be afraid of the negative space. This actually feels really good because the picture is taking up 2 columns, and you want your picture to stay within your grid. So I wouldn't want my picture to be over here because that is coming over the grid, where this is lined up right here and it's right in that grid, and then this kind of descriptor, and you do need a caption for your picture. This is in its own column that fits with this column below, and that feels like it has a really good structure to it. So if I turn this on to preview, you can see that this is very clearly the description for that picture, where the image or the story clearly continues down here. So this is a good solution. So this student also has a 3 column, and you can see that if I click on this and move it, that has that same, it has a text wrap on it. And this student took the quote marks and the quote, the pullout quote itself, and grouped it together and then moved it in. And this is a great way to do quotes. I do this often. I kind of use bigger quotes and then turn down the opacity. So if you click on, let me see if I can click on mine. If I click on the opacity up here, you can see that this is 48. So it's just a nice way to add a little bit of a little more color, but it also feels like a little bit of a design accent, and that feels good too. And it's nice that this kind of floats in the center, and there is some negative space on both of these sides. This student has the quote centered. This last one that we looked at, it was left justified. You could do it either way. There's no right or wrong. I think for this it works really well that it's centered, because even there's a couple that have like some smaller words in it, and I think this is going to feel a lot better than left justifying it. So I want to point out that this has a couple of hyphens in it, and that's okay because these are hyphenated words. So show stopping. I just saw another one. Where was it? Oh, 7 year, right here, 7 year. They're hyphenated words, and hyphenated words are fine to be hyphenated, so don't feel like you have to get rid of those. Okay, so that's this one, how it interrupts the text, which is really what I'm looking for. That's important. I did pull up another one that I wanted to bring out because I had quite a few students this last semester that did their quotes in this way. They didn't interrupt the text at all. And it's fine to do this. It's a little bit on the cheater side because you're not having to deal with text wrap or trying to fit it in on the on the page. So this isn't really enough text. I was looking for 2 pages. So if your document looks like this, you really need to do another spread that's going to have a lot more text to it. And I mean, it's fine to do this on a quote because sometimes that is something that we do, is that we'll put a quote on a picture or in some kind of negative space, and it doesn't interrupt the text. But it is good practice to really to try and interrupt the text and squeeze it in, because you don't always have room on a picture. So for this project, I am leaving it up to you, but I do want you to at least practice and kind of play with that text wrap. And text wrap on images works the same. So let's check this out here. So this image has the jump object. So no matter where you move it, it's going to kind of jump around. So what's important here, and I'm going to undo, let me go back. What's important here is that this picture is exactly the width of your column, so you can see when we're looking at it in this view, in that normal view, that picture is the exact same width, and that's important. You can take your picture and bleed it off the edge. There's nothing wrong with this either. In this instance, this guy would get cropped off, so probably not a great idea. But depending on what your picture is, that's perfectly fine. Of course, if you're going to do that, then you may want to take the other side and do the same thing, so it has that same feel off both sides. But again, that's your decision. Just a couple different options there. Okay, so that's pull out quotes and text wraps.